Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar. Nate Lundy is on my right. It is a Denver Broncos celebration Monday, reaction Monday, if you will, Nate. The Broncos get their first ever win against the Raiders in Las Vegas. It's been a while. As a matter of fact, it was 8 games for the Broncos on the road in which they had lost, going back to Oakland, obviously. So now a big one for the Broncos. It makes a big difference in the AFC playoff chase. We can get into that. Troy Renck from the Denver Post will join us a little bit later in the program. But for the Broncos, obviously another good performance by Bo Nix. It took Denver a little while to get going in this game, though, maybe longer than anybody hoped. Obviously, the Raiders walk away with a halftime lead. It looked like Denver was they were fine. They were in it, but they weren't really necessarily, it seemingly like having the kind of traction that we'd seen in the past couple of games, even in ones, say, against the Chiefs, in which they lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a little bit frustrating there in the first half, but I don't know that, at least for me, I don't know that I ever felt like the Broncos were in trouble. And maybe that's just because I recognize that the Raiders suck. And I just didn't, I didn't feel like it was going to be something that the Broncos couldn't overcome. The only question was whether or not they were going to continue to protect the ball, don't have the turnovers, and keep the Raiders from being able to have a short field. But, look, that's a bad Raiders team. It just is. It's Max Crosby, and that's it. That's the only thing that exists on that team that is worth a crap. Right now, they completely need to blow it up. It's why I think they absolutely need to be tanking right now and trying to get ahead of the Jaguars for the #1 pick. They should be doing everything they possibly can so that they can position themselves to do a true reset by the time they get to next season.
Yeah, and for the Raiders, obviously, Gardner Minshew breaks his collarbone on that.
Knew it as soon as he hit the ground, too. I said it to my wife.
Yep.
I said, look right where he grabbed. Yeah. And I was like, yep, he just snapped his collarbone.
Yep. So he's out for the season. Obviously, for the Raiders, we argued that if they aren't in full tank mode, they're close. Well, in this case, obviously, that makes things easier. You bring up Jacksonville for the Raiders. If the Raiders finish second with the second pick to Jacksonville, they're probably still okay because Jacksonville isn't picking a quarterback. So the Raiders can probably grab Shedeur Sanders, a player that they'd love to get out of Colorado. Of course, Colorado loses their game to Kansas on Saturday. Disappointing loss, not entirely shocking. Kansas playing like they're supposed to now when they were ranked 22nd in the country preseason. First team in history to knock off 3 consecutive top 25 teams in 3 weeks, but despite of a losing record. But that doesn't change the idea that Sanders and the Raiders seem to be a really good fit. They just have to find a way to get back past the Giants, and perhaps this injury to Minshew is what does it. But Bo Nix continues to play really, really good football in the last 5 games, and keep in mind, the Broncos have lost 2 of their last 5 games. Nix has thrown 11 touchdowns and 1 interception. So when you talk about finding a way to avoid these kind of mistakes, these are the kind of things the Broncos in recent years, they've lost these kind of games where they shouldn't have lost these kind of games because they've made the mistakes. I joke that over in England, we say it's a trap game here, right? Oh, the Broncos need to be careful. It's a trap game. It's not a trap game, as you pointed out. The Raiders are terrible. There's no trap involved. It's, are you going to mess it up? Over the pond, they call it a banana peel game, and that's exactly what you want to avoid, is finding a way that you don't mess it up. The Broncos did not get a lot of traction, but in part because Nix has been taking such good care of the ball, you avoided potential big plays that would flip the game and then bring it out of hand for the Broncos.
Yeah,
I'm with you. I didn't really think they were in big trouble at any stage.
No, I didn't, because I recognized, like I said, this is not a good Raiders team. And so, this is a game you needed to win. This is a game you wanted to win. This is a game where, as we talked about last week, when you saw the wide angle shots on CBS, you saw all the orange in the stands. There was a ton of Broncos love inside the stadium, and I think that it was one of those, you just kind of waited for things to slowly come together. Cortland Sutton continues to perform extremely well, and I think that the relationship and the connection that is existing right now between Bo Nix and Cortland is something that cannot be overstated, and that is something that can carry them forward here as they get ready for Monday Night Football.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. And Cortland Sutton is a big part of it as well. Sutton has really, really looked good. And especially when you start to break it down, not just with Knicks, but over the last 2 seasons. Remember, Sutton had 10 touchdowns last year with Russell Wilson on a Broncos offense that was just fundamentally broken, and managed to sync up for 10 touchdowns, which put him 6th in the league. And now, of course, with Knicks, he's having a really, really good connection, on pace now for just slightly over 1,000 yards, something he hasn't done since 2019. 2 touchdowns, both of them of the toe tap variety, really good receptions. He is under contract for the Broncos for 1 more year. But it will be interesting to see what happens there. That's a down the road issue. But we know that there's been challenges. Sutton would like a new deal. The Broncos, understandably, looking at Sutton's age, injury history, and the fact of where they are in their development, as well as what wide receivers make in free agency, have been reluctant to give him a brand new deal just yet. They wanted to see a little bit more. Over the last couple seasons, I think you've seen what you've wanted to see. 1 year at about $13.5 million, but coming into this season, the Broncos and Sutton had to come to some sort of agreement to shuffle some money around to make him happy. Might be looking at again next year, but then again, if he's playing like this, maybe the Broncos look at it as a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's absolutely a good problem to have. And I think that it's one that they'll address here in 2 months and figure out exactly what they want to do. But I think it's nice that you have that kind of a problem, and that it might change or adjust how you can go after your draft strategy, how you can go after your free agent strategy. All of those things give you cause to be sort of, I guess, cautiously optimistic as to what the offseason could mean in terms of who stays, who goes, what this roster looks like by the time you get to September. But right now, what a great run that this team is on, and a great performance by Bo Nix. He's not putting the ball in harm's way. He's being smart with it. And those are things that Trent Green talked about on the broadcast yesterday. And that I think we just all recognize that that's part of the maturity of what we're seeing out of this kid.
Yeah. And I think the question is, I think we'd seen enough, but after this kind of game in which the Broncos were not at their best and still find a way to win by double digits on the road, I think you've seen what you need to see out of Bo Nix. Who knows where the ceiling is? Who has any idea? But you know that you have a guy that at least is absolutely in sync with this coach, for sure. Processes quickly, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. If you didn't know already, even though this game itself, it wasn't dazzling, because the Broncos themselves were just kind of off. Special teams play, they cough up a fake punt. You had to settle for 5 field goals. But Nix ends up basically just kind of keeping the team on an even keel, keeping the trains running on time, even without a good running game yesterday as well. To me, that was another one of those performances that we've seen. It's not necessarily in the dazzling stats that make me look at Bo Nix and say, okay, you've got your guy. You've got your guy, certainly through his rookie contract, probably beyond that. You finally found a quarterback. Whether he becomes Peyton Manning or John Elway, who knows, who cares? But for the Denver Broncos, they've got their guy. And I think coming into this season, you weren't sure. We talked about the whole point of this season, making sure that Bo Nix can handle it. If we didn't know, I think now we know. And now this back half of this last few games of the season, you have the Browns on next Monday Night Football, a bye week, and then a 4-game gauntlet of which all these teams might be playoff relevant. Bengals are barely hanging on. But now you actually get to say, we've solved that. Nix is the guy. We know that. Now we're going for a playoff push right now. Are you going to make that much noise? Who knows? But you got to get in there. And for the Broncos to make the playoffs in Bo Nix's rookie season, that would be a coup by any measurement.
Yeah, it would be. And it's not what any of us expected, or at least not what I expected. I know that some people did that, looked through the blue and orange glasses and had a good feeling about what's going on. I know there were people that expected that. I know you made the comment about the fake punt. I got to be honest, that was perfectly executed.
It was.
The Raiders perfectly executed a fake punt,
and the timing on it was great. Not a time you would expect to see the fake
Absolutely.
punt. There wasn't a need.
It was actually a brilliant play call by the Raiders. One of the few that they had yesterday. But you talked about the special teams and all the field goals and things like that. Man, ask the Washington Commanders about their kicking game this morning. I know that it sucks when you get down there and you got to settle for field goals and field goals and field goals. I understand that, but at least you got a kicker that can make them. Because Washington probably beats the Cowboys yesterday if they have a kicker that isn't shanking extra points. So I'm okay. I'm okay with with settling for field goals only because I trust Will Lutz to make them. And there are a number of teams right now in the NFL that can't say that. So as much as I would like to see 7 on the board and not 3, at least when you bring your kicker out there, you're feeling somewhat confident as a Broncos fan that that person is actually going to get the job done, as opposed to some of the things that we have seen before. I know the blocked kick with Kansas City still stings, but that's not Lutz's fault. He's out there doing exactly what he gets paid to do. And I think, like I said, ask the Commanders after yesterday.
Or the Bears. Another team that had
the Bears the same way, but at least the Bears got it into overtime.
Yeah.
Before that wound up happening. But, the Commanders missed 2 extra points, including the one that would have put the game into overtime. So yeah, that's pretty bad. If you're the Commanders right now, you just start going for 2 every single time. Because frankly, I trust Jaden Daniels more than I trust anything they got on special teams right now. Especially when you manage to give up a return touchdown on an onside kick, for crying out loud. So yeah, that game was just ridiculous. But beyond all of that, be happy. You finally won in Vegas. Your fan base showed up and enjoyed themselves. And you now get a Monday night game. Here's the only thing I'm going to warn you right now, folks. If you're planning on Monday, go right now to your nearest store and buy all of the hand warmers you possibly can before Monday.
Is it going to be miserable? I haven't even looked.
The overnight low on Monday is going to be 13 degrees after a high of 36 during the day.
Yikes.
The sunset is an hour and a half before kickoff.
Yikes.
Going to be freezing your ass off.
Yeah.
At Empower Field on Monday night.
Well, the Browns did well in that on Thursday. They find a way to topple the Steelers on Thursday night in a snowstorm. So I guess you got.
Well, it won't be. I don't think it's not snow. It's just it's going to be freaking cold on Monday night.
But that is not necessarily an advantage for Denver when you're talking about the folks from Cleveland. They're used to
go get your hand warmers now.
For the fans. Yikes.
Go get them. Buy them in bulk. Bring some to us.
Bulk hand warmers.
They sell them at Costco.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Oh, hell yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Oh, get a whole bunch of those things, start shoving them down your pants.
Yeah, hand them off to friends. Maybe they'll trade you around or something for you later in the game. So who knows? But yeah, that's a big game for the Broncos. They'll the bye after that. If they get that one done, boy, we'll go over the playoff probabilities in just a little bit, but it would be a very, very big win for the Broncos. One question about the Knicks situation that I think is intriguing, Nate. The focus on the pass for Knicks. By the way, he's had no fewer than 30 pass attempts in each of the last 5 games, and he's getting up into the high 30s now more and more often. It also means that he's taking more sacks, 10 sacks in the last 5 games, and he's only run more than 5 yards on the ground, 5 yards rushing or better in any of the last 5 games. He had 36 against the Ravens in that game. But otherwise, the run has basically moved out of the way. Knicks is basically running if he needs to scramble. Is that the right approach, or would you rather see a little bit more of some of the play calling? It seems as if Knicks' yards are only coming off improvisation, and earlier in the year, scheming them in here and there seemed to be pretty advantageous.
Now, I'm a lot happier keeping him healthy and keeping him upright, and going ahead and eating the sack when it's necessary. I'd like to see the line give him a little bit better protection, try to avoid at least, I can handle the sacks. I mean, that every quarterback gets sacked. Even Mahomes, even Mahomes gets sacked,
right?
And gets sacked a lot, as a matter of fact. So I'm okay with a couple of sacks a game. I think that is just par for the course with really good, defenses that are out there right now. So I'm okay with that one, Sean. I don't think that one concerns me too much, because would I rather him, take a loss, or would I rather him, throw one of those, let me just lob it in the air and see what happens? Of course not. I don't want the turnover worthy plays, which he has managed to avoid over the course of the last 7 games. So if he can continue to do that, if it means that you lose a few yards here and there on the sacks, I'm going to be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I understand why Broncos fans take a look at some of this. And I had a couple of people reach out and say, well, why aren't they running him anymore? And that's because, you run the risk of injury with that. That's one of the reasons that teams still generally like pocket passers. You like mobility. Patrick Mahomes has mobility. Aaron Rodgers, for the most of his career, had mobility, and Russell Wilson had mobility. Those three guys tended, for the course of their career, and Mahomes thus far, to use the mobility to extend the plays and throw them, not necessarily tuck and run. They're just using the mobility to extend. Bo Nix has done that as well. I think that's part of the idea of sort of raising Bo Nix as a quarterback, right? You know he can run if you call a running play. You know he can. You know that he can move around. The idea now is to get him used to being a pocket passer and working from the pocket and taking advantage of what he can. And so far, so good. So again, with what we've seen with Nix over the course of the season and Sean Payton's scheme for it, I think the first couple of games, Payton was not all that in tune with what he needed to do. Having Nix throw too often, the game in Seattle, too many gone there. But after about really after that Jets game, the disaster of the weather that just made it unplayable, it seemed as if the Broncos after that started to really focus in, and Sean Payton focused in on calling what Nix can do. As a result, it's been really good. Trent Green mentioned on the broadcast, 20 touchdowns to 2 picks in the last 10 games for Bo Nix. That's what he's been responsible for on the whole. That's really impressive. And for a guy like Sean Payton, we talked about this a bit last week, in today's NFL, the gunslinger mentality is out. They don't want guys turning the ball over. They don't want it on the ground. They don't want it going to the other team in the air. Nix is doing that, but yeah, he is doing it in a more traditional, let's say, Drew Brees style of play.
Yeah, they are. You want to be able to hopefully have some success within the pocket. Not every quarterback in the NFL in 2024 needs to be a running quarterback. Not everybody needs to be, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, et cetera. It doesn't hurt if you have somebody like that, but not everybody needs to be that guy. So if you can be successful, and I think that's where, in part, as this team continues to improve its overall roster between now and next season and then the following season as well, that's where you're going to see an even bigger difference, I believe, within Bo Nix. I think, I'm trying not to do too much of it, but if you were to look ahead to next season, for example, there's always discussion, especially amongst quarterbacks, of this idea of a sophomore slump, of taking a little bit of a step back after you've been in the league for a little bit. Defensive coordinators now have more film on you and all those kinds of things. I think that there's something to be said for that. But what I sort of am hopeful for, I guess you could say, between George Payton and Sean Payton, is that what you might see from a sophomore slump gets offset by the fact that they're going to be able to improve this roster because they're not going to have the same kind of handcuffs, right? That maybe you will see something over here that you go, okay, this is a little bit of a negative, but I can help myself out with a positive over here and give him more weapons. And those two things are going to offset each other, and you might be able to actually avoid the stereotypical sophomore slump.
Yeah. And look, the sophomore slump is real, and it's real in virtually every sport. And we tag it that, but it's very simple. Nate basically explained it, right? If you can play in any sport, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, you name it, you'll see this. If you can play, it shows early. And we've seen that with a lot of the quarterbacks this year. And we've certainly seen it with Bo Nix. But as teams get a feel for you, as they get more film on you, as they start to get your tendencies and they have time to plan for it. And now the league adjusts to you. And it's not shocking that perhaps a guy who comes in after his first year and said, okay, I'm doing what I'm doing, I figured it out. And then the league adjusts, and it's a lot harder. And that's how that generally works. If you're going to be a great player, then the next adjustment is, how do you adjust to the league? Because you've gotten to the league, you get used to the speed. I think Bo Nix has gotten all of that now. That's good. And he's putting up terrific numbers, and he's going to be in the mix for Rookie of the Year. But the league will adjust next year, and you're absolutely right. You look at teams like the Chiefs, and that game that the Broncos had, they should have won, where Patrick Mahomes congratulated him and talked about how the Broncos need to get it. They have their guy. Yeah. Well, they're going to be paying attention to him as if he's their guy next year too. And they know what he's capable of. So yeah, that's a potential concern, but you want to bring him more help, and the money will be there. This is all a really, really good situation, and they continue to build upon it. And it pays off when you're talking about the playoff probabilities, which we'll discuss in a moment, because for the Broncos, they have gotten really, really positive. But as we age, each of us finds things about ourselves that we'd like to improve. Maybe in your case, it's getting better sleep or losing weight, or maybe you're looking for more energy or focus during your day. Well, that's where our friend at Skin City Wellness can help, because their focus is on empowering patients on their own healthcare journey and optimizing their health the way they want to. Your needs are unique. You are unique. So you need to find someone who can work with that uniqueness and make sure that you can get to your goals in a way that works for you. You start with patient-specific analysis via blood work, and then the Skin City Wellness experts consult on a one-on-one basis, providing their patients with transparency regarding their health concerns, and their goals. Once you have all that information, then you start working for the foundation for optimized health and longevity with the cutting-edge technologies you expect: hormone replacement, semaglutide, GLP-1 therapies, but also peptides, NAD+, and a lot more. All of these therapies can help their patients burn fat, assist with weight loss, improve your sleep or sleep cycles, improve your cognitive functions, your executive focus, a lot of the energy during the day. All of these things can be accomplished, but they need to be accomplished in the way that works best for you. And you don't maybe want all of them. That's fine. That's the point. That's why you want to work with Skin City Wellness. They're going to work with you to find out what works best for your body so you can find out what you want to accomplish in the fastest and best possible way without any of the extra stuff that you don't need. So check them out online today at skincitywellness.com. Mention Mile High Sports and get $50 off your initial blood work and consultation. So take control of your health your way with Skin City Wellness. Nate, the playoff probabilities, which of course, there's no voters, there's no polls. It's just probabilities based on what we've seen thus far. The Broncos still have to take care of business. But after this win, we knew it would jump. And the fact that a couple things changed in the AFC, we'll look back at the league in a little bit as well. But the Broncos playoff odds are now 70% that they will make the playoffs. There are 7 teams with high probabilities, as you could expect: the Chiefs, the Bills, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the Chargers, Houston, in part because of their division, and then the Denver Broncos. And then it drops precipitously after that. Next closest competitors, the Colts, after their loss to the Lions, down to 33%. Miami is staying alive behind, now that Tua Tagovailoa is back, they're playing better. It's at 19%. The Bengals and the Titans, again, because of that division, at 4%. So, I mean, you're talking about the Broncos having better than double the playoff odds of their next competitor. The Colts loss combined with the Broncos win is a massive, massive change in the way that the playoffs stack up.
Yeah, there really is. Miami has an incredibly easy schedule remaining, and so they do have an opportunity to try to make a push. An example, they still get to play the Jets twice. Just to give you an idea, they haven't played them yet. So they've got the Jets on their schedule still twice. They've got a reeling Niners team on their schedule. They've got the Browns on their schedule. So they have an opportunity, and they may be able to sneak in some extra wins. They'd be obviously in a much different position if Tua hadn't had the concussion yet again. So they would be in that spot. But yes, the Colts yesterday, that is obviously extremely beneficial. The Broncos, from a remaining strength of schedule, are basically the middle of the pack. They've got a couple of tough games because they do still have to play the Chargers. They do still have to play the Chiefs as well. But then you also look at, well, okay, can you take care of business against Cincinnati? We've talked about that. Can you take care of business on Monday night in the cold against the Browns? That's something to be able to consider. But for the most part, they are sitting on a schedule remaining that they can control a lot of the narrative of what happens within the rest of the AFC. Their schedule is one that I believe they can have that kind of control. How the hell the Chiefs keep figuring out how to win is going to drive me bat bleep crazy for the rest of this season.
Wizard playing at quarterback, basically.
They have 5 wins by less than a touchdown. 5 wins by 6 points or less. And I know it was the Panthers stink, y'all, but at some point, is the NFL going to learn to not leave time on the clock? Ever? You guys are going to ever learn to not leave time on the clock for Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes? Like, how freaking hard is that to understand? But I saw, you guys have seen the stat that if you took every 1-score game and flipped the result, so somebody put this together. If you took every 1-score game that has happened this year and flipped the result, Kansas City would be 16th in the AFC.
Wow.
But 16th. You know what? They would have 2 wins if you took all of them. And look, it doesn't matter. What matters is what it says in the standings and what it says on the scoreboard. But that tells me that, I mean, unfortunately, because of their record, they're going to wind up being at Arrowhead. But holy crap, man, if they could find a way to not have home field in the AFC, they are toast. They are toast in the playoffs if they have to go on the road.
And there's a risk. I mean, Buffalo could catch them. But then again, winning close games is a skill.
Buffalo has a cake schedule down the stretch.
But winning close games is a skill,
than the Lions.
And that's a part of it as well. And for the Broncos, it's worth noting as too when you look at the way this breaks down. We know that the AFC, we know the whole league's a little bottom heavy, a little more than it usually is. But the Broncos are now 6-1 against teams under 500.
Yeah, you're beating the teams you're supposed to beat.
You've won one game, teams over 500.
Yeah.
And that's actually not that bad. Now, what it means is their strength of victory, if you will, is at 325. The teams they're beating have a abysmal win percentage, but that doesn't make any difference. You play who's on the schedule, and the Chargers who play tonight, of course, there's only 333. Those are the only two teams in playoff position that have a strength of victory that is that low. Obviously, both teams' strength of schedule is also comparatively low because they did not win their division, because the Chiefs have been doing that for a long time now, and they're going to do it again this year. But for the Broncos, that's a big one. And what it essentially means is if they can take care of business, which doesn't mean they have to win out, but if they can take care of business and beat the teams they're supposed to beat, like the Browns, probably we'll find out a little bit more next week, but probably like the Bengals, a team that may very well be out of it by the time the Broncos get there. Yeah, you will probably make the playoffs. The odds are, because of this, what you pointed out with the Bills, the Chiefs are probably coming with everything they've got. They'll probably need it to have the top seed in the AFC. They will probably need that game against the Broncos. And there's, of course, the shift from the Thursday Night Football as well. But the Broncos put themselves in a position where if they just take care of business, beat sub 500 teams, win your home games, or at least be in the mix for all the rest of them, you should be in good shape. This team at this point, I think you can say fairly, the expectation for the Broncos should be to make the playoffs. That's a pretty exciting place to be in.
Oh, it's a fantastic place to be.
I mean, does it still feel like it would be fortunate for you, or have your expectations changed?
No,
Mine have. At this point, I'm like, you should make the wild card. Now, I don't care if you're the 7th seed. In fact, I think that's what you should be aiming for, is the 7th.
Yeah,
but I think that should be something they take.
Yeah, I share some of that. I don't know that it is necessarily a boom or bust type of thing for me still. Because look, you've got two things that are working in your favor right now for why you are in the position that you're in from a playoff standpoint. First and foremost, your rookie quarterback is outplaying what even the most optimistic of people could have asked him to do. Yes. That is without question. You could have been as optimistic about him as possible and still not expected this. So that's part one. Subsequently, this defense, which we said during training camp, this defense is better than people think it is. And they are living up to that. And Vance Joseph's doing a very good job. And I give a lot of credit to VJ for that. But the other thing that is working in your favor is there are teams that, frankly, 3 months ago, we said would have been easily in the wild card discussion that are not. The Jets are underachieving. The Bengals are underachieving. Miami lost its quarterback and therefore is underachieving. All of these teams that were expected to be in the wild card mix are dangerously close to falling out of the playoff discussion by the time we get to, the second week of December. And these are teams that were expected to be there. And it's not hard to see why you would have expected that. So you're getting benefited by the fact that the unpredictability and the parity that exists within the NFL continues in 2024. It's why, it's why this league makes $17 billion a year, is because they provide this level of entertainment and this level of, oh my gosh, did you just see this upset, or did you just see this play happen? The fact that the Washington Commanders can't kick an extra point doesn't take away from the fact that, did you see the touchdown that McLaurin had? Yeah. Good God. Jaden Daniels did it again. He did it again. And they should have at least gone to overtime if they can make an extra point. Wow. The Commanders are fun to watch.
Yeah.
And so you see all of that happening within the NFL. And I know that's over on the NFC side of things, but you see all of this happening inside the NFL. And it's why, any given Sunday stuff can happen. But it's also why we're having this discussion about the Broncos is some of the stuff that's out of their control.
Yes.
And that's why I say that to me, it's not boom or bust with the playoffs. Well, yeah, I still think it's okay if I still think it's okay if they don't make it, because they've already proven to me that they are ahead of schedule.
Okay. Well, that makes some sense. I get that. And I do agree that if, for example, things aren't it doesn't work out. They end up getting knocked out in something of a tiebreaker or something like that. Yes, I mean, I understand that, and there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But yeah, it does feel at this point because, and in part, that's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because things have broken that way, because teams that made the playoffs last year, like the Browns, have flamed out. The Bengals have flamed out. The Jets never really materialized into what they thought. Jacksonville made the playoffs last year. They are not making it. I mean, so you didn't assume that 3 of the playoff teams would just fall off a cliff in the AFC last year, but they essentially have. But sometimes when that lands in your lap, it feels like a missed opportunity if you don't take it.
Oh, sure. Of course it does.
I think that's a lot of it.
That part I think is very fair. If there are fans that are going, son of a bitch, if the dominoes are gonna fall like this, we better win.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I do totally get that. But I'm telling you right now, this, I know we got 5 more games to go, and there's still a bye week in there and all of that. This team has already outperformed what I could have expected and has shown me that the trajectory is where it needs to be, regardless of whether they make the wild card or not.
I think that's probably a fair way of putting it because, yeah, I mean, obviously you're talking about now a couple
so
games
much
over
confidence,
500, and then who knows? We'll find out a little bit more about that playoff picture with tonight's Harbaugh Bowl. Try to say that 5 times. Harbaugh Bowl. Harbaugh Bowl.
Don't try to do the whole thing. Just like cut it off. Harbaugh Bowl.
There you go. We'll find out more about that. Obviously, both those teams in position.
Sounds like something I could order at like a poke place.
Yeah.
Can I get the Harbaugh Bowl?
Harbaugh Bowl? Right. Yeah, it does actually. Yeah, we'll touch on that as well in a little bit, but we'll find out what the playoff situation looks like after that, because of course those are the 2 teams directly ahead of the Broncos, and they have the tiebreaker on neither. They have lost to both of those teams, but when you're looking at the playoff circumstance after that, it will change. The Broncos do have the one hard thing behind them. You're trying to make the wild card as more than likely a 3rd place team in your division. And that would be the one thing that I look at it and say, hey, make sure you slow down a little bit. It is not easy to do. The way you draw it up into making the playoffs, and granted, by extending and adding a spot, you've added an opportunity for that. But nobody ever looks at it and says, oh, that's okay, we'll finish 3rd in the division and make the wild card. If that happens, quite frankly, you're a little lucky because there's 4 different divisions. Not everyone in 3rd place has a chance to make it. It's a little bit lucky, and the Broncos have gotten a little bit lucky on what's happened to the rest of the AFC. But by getting the win and by continuing to stack up the wins, they continue to put themselves in a position where if the weird things happen around them, it doesn't impact them that much. You just control what you can control and go get a win. They go into Vegas, win there for their first time in history, 8 straight road games. To me, even the Vegas thing is one thing, but they've lost on the road to the Raiders 8 straight times. And the Raiders and the Broncos during that span have both been more or less pretty awful teams. So that was sort of a monkey you'd like to get off of your back. And I think they get that big win. Is there anything you're looking at in this particular game that maybe raised a little bit of concerns besides the injuries? I know they didn't have Zach Allen. He had the heel injury. He wasn't able to go. And then Riley Moss was injured. It looks like that may be an MCL injury that is not as serious as it maybe have looked. That will be good. We'll find out more as the week goes along. But was there anything concerning about that? I did think that in the early going in the first half, I thought the Raiders were able to move the ball in a way that we haven't seen a lot of teams move the ball, and in fact, a lot of better teams move the ball against the Broncos. And I'm not sure what the slow start was from.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what that was either. My biggest concern coming out of yesterday is Riley Moss, to be honest with you. But I think beyond that, the fact that you could move the ball, okay, you set some things up from an offensive standpoint, and you found yourself some success. I think that a little bit of that snowballed. Gardner Minshew's always struck me as that guy that kind of gets momentum going, and he kind of rides that sort of swagger wave that he gets, and that those things tend to continue to play on each other, right? And it just continues to build and build and build. That's just to me, that's how I feel about Gardner Minshew. I just feel like stuff like that happens to him. I feel kind of the same way about Baker Mayfield, to be honest.
Yes.
I think that sometimes when he has success, he just kind of gets that little bit of that swagger, and then he just starts moving the ball around, and it's like a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, right? But yeah, I think that didn't concern me as much. My biggest concern coming out of yesterday was the injury to Riley Moss.
Yeah, the injury to Riley Moss, obviously, you talk about the importance of that position and how effective he's been for the Broncos. We'll find out a little bit more about that over the course of the week. Apparently, it could have been a lot worse. Appears to be an MCL injury. We'll find out more as the week goes along, but they do get that big win. Joining us to talk about it, I mentioned he joined us as we does every Monday and Friday from the Denver Post and the host of the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck as Troy Renck. Troy, thanks so much for joining us. The Broncos get that monkey off their back. They win in Las Vegas for the first time. They break an 8-year string in which they couldn't win on the road, which is kind of odd given that neither of these teams have been great during that span. But Nate and I had the same thought. Even though the Broncos did not have an early lead, they did not have the halftime lead, it never really felt as if they were in actual danger. Is that overconfidence on my part, or did the Broncos really just get a slow start and look like they still had this?
Yeah, I would say it got greasy. When you're down at halftime on the road where a place you've never won, you've lost 8 straight on the road, I'd had more concern maybe than you did. So you had a better vibe on it. They needed a pick, they needed a turnover, they needed a takeaway to change it. And that's what Brandon Jones delivered, not unlike with Patrick Surtain in the first matchup. And, again, credit to Bo Nix for his ability to continue to take chances and take care of the ball. I mean, he's throwing the 50-50 ball to Cortland Sutton. And Sean Payton explained this morning on his presser that the reason they didn't run the ball is because they were getting so much zero coverage and so many blitz looks and heavy looks that it ended up being a game where they passed. He dropped back 44 times. He only got sacked once. And Max Crosby's 10-game sack streak against the Broncos ended. But Bo Nix made plays. I didn't like how the end of that game was managed with Peyton and the clock, but he said that they were going for the win. That's why they didn't try to run the ball. But again, the Broncos, we've talked about, Sean, they need not apologize ever for a road win. They're 7-5. They're firmly in the playoff picture. They have winnable games coming up against Cleveland and the Colts at home. You take care of those games, and now you need to win one of the final 3 against the Chargers, Bengals, and Chiefs. If you win these other 2, because you get to 10, you're going to be in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the clock management, let's touch on that a little bit, because that is interesting. I mean, obviously, I had questions about that too. I was watching it with a group of people, and a whole bunch of people had questions about that, looking at why are you not running this out? And I get the idea, you're going for a win, but I've always found that as a bit of coach speak. Running out the clock when you're ahead and the other team has to go the length of the field is also going for the win, right? Unless style points matter to you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think the nature of which that game got called, where they felt like because of the way the Raiders were playing defense in terms of blitzing and zero coverage, that they decided we're not going to be able to run the clock out. But at that point, it's not about running the clock out. It's about, in that case, running a bunch of the clock off, making them use their timeouts. And it just felt too dangerous. I mean, they ran 15 seconds off the clock.
For a drive.
It was for that drive. They went from 338 to 323. It was essentially like a turnover on the first play, and one of those passes by Nix could have been intercepted, and so it was just like, wait, what is going on here? And it just felt like you continue to put the defense in a position where you ask them. Now again, they caught a break because Desmond Ridder comes in, and maybe that's part of the thinking. They're not going to say that, but there's no way Desmond Ridder is going to come down and beat us. Well, if you think that, then that's the reason you take time off the clock and make it harder for Desmond Ridder. I just would have hated to see them lose and say, well, listen, that's on the defense. They got to come up with a stand. It's like, is it? Is it? I mean, these things got to complement each other. But it is, I will say this, it is more and more of Sean Payton's personality that he had in New Orleans coming out. That they just go for, they're like, we got to punch it. We're going to go for the knockout. We're winning on all the cards, Sean, but we're going for the knockout in the final round. And it's like, okay, but you do leave sometimes you put your chin out, you get hit, and that's a part of the danger. And some of it is just the PTSD as Broncos fans and those covering it in the last 8 years, like, hey, this game's in the bag. Why are you doing anything to put it at risk? And his thinking is he's so far removed from that, is that this team's confident. We can put it away on our offense. And it's like, okay, I wouldn't have done it that way. I wouldn't have, but it worked out. And I will say this, one of the takeaways from this is they didn't play great and they won. They stunk on special teams outside of Will Lutz. They figured out the field goal operation, 5 field goals, and then they give up a fake punt for 34 yards and a 59-yard kick return. That stuff you got to clean up, because against better teams, a kickoff return or a fake punt can be the difference in the game.
The running game, and I get the argument, but yeah, again, this is the third straight week you and I are talking about this, though. I mean, now you Marvin Mims gets a couple carries, -2 yards. Mims had a better performance in the game overall. He did get that 37-yard that play. Javonte Williams 8 carries for -2. That's what actually happened. Estime got 3 for 15, so 5 yards a carry for Estime, further leaning into at least what you and I have gone over. And Jaleel McLaughlin, on his 7 carries, did get 44 yards, averaging 6.3 per, a little bit more effective with the speed game than the power game. But again, that means for the Broncos on the whole, 22 carries for 63 yards. They didn't even average 3 per carry. For the majority of what's going on with the Broncos, it looks really positive, but it still seems to me as if the running game is a bit of a mess. And it doesn't seem as if the coaching staff has a handle on necessarily even what they want to do. Maybe I'm seeing it. Maybe I'm seeing it off. Can you let me know?
Yeah, it was funny. Sean Payton's first question he was asked today was about Vele, and he answered that as if he were asked about Estime. Then he came back, answered the Vele thing, and said, well, about Estime, he's healthy, he's ready. We need to find him more opportunities. And he admitted sometimes with rookies as coaches that the coaches are guilty of not finding a clearer path to the lineup for him. I just, again, and I hate this because it's not personal with Javonte. It isn't. And I come across as the guy that somehow doesn't like him. It's 8 carries. What do you have, 2 yards, Sean? I mean, it's
Negative
not
2 yards.
Yeah, negative. It's not working. And you have this kid who's an absolute brute physically, who can wear people down. And I mean, it's just, if he was fumbling, I get it. And I'll qualify it with, we don't watch practice during the season. We're not allowed to. So if stuff's going on at practice and he's fumbling in practice or he's missing assignments, that's fine. And if he's protecting the kid and he's just not saying it, okay. And I am going to do a little more investigating on that and trying to get a better read of, is he not practicing well? Because if that's the case, that's fine. That's Coach's prerogative to play the guys to play well in practice. It's just what my eyes are telling me every Sunday is that Estime should be your starter. You've got to change a pace back in McLaughlin and or Mims. I'm not worried about that as much as figuring out the starter. And I don't want to say it's a mess. I know you use that word and I understand it. It's just confusing to me. So either they're not comfortable with the rookie, even though they say they are, or he's not winning it in practice, and that's part of it, and they don't want to bring that up. That's a fair reason. Or it's just, hey, it's time. You're 7-5. You need to make a push. Look at those final 3 games. Your best players need to be on the field against Chargers, Bengals, Chiefs. We cannot be having this same conversation, Sean, in 2-3 weeks from now of Javonte had 14 carries for 32 yards and Estime had 6 for 40. Like, what are we doing? Javonte can be the third down back. If you're going to try to get one game going, and as Peyton said, maybe this wasn't the game to do it because of the blitzes. Okay, I think you can still crease the blitz, though. I think they were giving him too much credit. Regardless, I still want to see Estime start out as the starter and then go from there rather than the other way around. Because the other way around, he never gets enough carries.
Yeah, that's an interesting point because it is. That's I think the biggest part of it is he's just not going to end up getting the carries there. But Troy, before we leave you, I had a thought because you wrote a really good story about the Colorado Buffaloes performance in Kansas, or lack thereof, really. And when you talk about this game for the Buffs, I wonder if Devin Neal is still running somewhere. Obviously, a demolition in many ways by Kansas to Colorado. Kansas is obviously playing very, very well, but for the Buffaloes, who had held at one point, a team in Florida to 200 yards below their rushing average, to cough up 522 yards and 29 first downs to the Kansas Jayhawks, they never really gave themselves a chance. You go look at the numbers that Shedeur Sanders put up, and he didn't have the best game in the world, but you're talking about a guy who completed 80% of his passes, had 3 touchdown passes. In a game, his team lost by 16.
Yeah, listen, I mean, when I cover that game, I wanted it to be about Travis Hunter, Shedeur, or Dion, and it was about Sharman. They were soft, Sean. Defensively, they absolutely got run over. There's no other way to say it. There's just no other way. Devin Neal had a legacy game. Now, he may end up in their Ring of Honor. He's that good. He has 52 career touchdowns. It felt like he had 40 on that game. He had 4 touchdowns, 270 yards rushing, the number of missed tackles, defensive penalties. They just got absolutely beat at the line of scrimmage. It was hard to watch. And to Coach Dion's credit, Coach Prime's credit, he came in and said, hey, we are addicted to the attention. We let it get to us. We start believing the clips. And Kansas had senior day. They had motivation. I wrote in a column before that, like they were desperate, like eating sushi from a gas station desperate. They had to win out to go to a bowl. And they're tired of hearing about Colorado. And that game had a lot of similarities to the Nebraska game. CU lost up front. And you can lose on one. You can lose one or the other. You can lose stopping the run, or you can lose when you're not running. You can't lose both on the road and typically win. And they lost both. And they're still going to have a great season. I mean, they're going to end up with 9 wins. But the Big 12 now is basically out. I mean, they have to have a miracle where all these teams lose. They control their destiny. And now you need help from multiple teams, and that stinks. But listen, these lessons you learn as you grow as a program. You go from 4 wins to 9 wins, and you have to remember in college, especially with young kids, playing on the road can be difficult. You can't play from behind. You can't be soft against the run and win because you lose control of the game, because you lose control of time of possession. You lose control of everything. Like you feel you're just flailing. And I don't care how good Travis Hunter and Shedeur are. If the other team has 500 plus yards and 29 first downs, you can't win that way. So they'll be all right. They'll bounce back. It was disappointing. I've seen 10 straight losses in that stadium between the Broncos and Buffs. I'm good.
I need to go back there, except for the tailgate and the barbecue. But when you look at the way that functions, and it's interesting because what you talked about, I think, is right, because you are talking about kids, and this is college and not the pros. Because I think if that's the kind of performance you get from the pros, the question that we follow up is, wow, you're looking at the coaching. How come you didn't get them prepared, right? How come you didn't get prepared? But Deion Sanders made it very clear after the game, and you alluded to it, and it was in your article right there. I started with, I said, oh no, here we go with the dumb stuff. And he said we have to do better. We have to do better as coaches or players. But pointed out again that for a certain point, you're talking about kids, and they're thinking, hey, we're glitz glamour, we're on national TV again. Now we're playing in an NFL stadium, and it is harder to deal with that with a bunch of college kids than it is with professionals. Because simply there's just a mentality difference, even though nowadays they might all be making millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, we do forget they're young. They're still 18 to 23 years old. And sometimes the threat of, hey, this team's really good. And this team, they see the record, they're 4-6, but Kansas had just knocked off Iowa State and BYU. And once that quarterback, Jalen Daniels, stopped throwing picks, they're a top 20 team. There's a reason they started the year in the top 20. Once he stopped throwing interceptions, they're good, and they have 2 corners who are going to play in the league. I mean, they have legitimately probably 5 NFL players with Neal. I think Daniels probably gets in camp somewhere. That Grimm kid's going to play in those 2 corners. So if you overlook them, it's kind of on you. But again, it's part of the growth, part of the humbling process of learning that as you get good, understanding still who you are. And then when you go on the road, you still have to have a physical identity. And, Buffs fans got fooled because they crushed UCF. UCF isn't as good. They're just not.
Right.
It was so early in the season. Their stats were skewed. Kansas is just a team that has legitimately 3 or 4 NFL players. And listen, I mean, and I don't mean to be critical of one player, Shiloh Sanders, but 3 penalties by Shiloh. You got missed tackles by the other safety. You got Bentley misses 2 or 3 tackles. Like, that's when he said, oh no, the dumb stuff. That first play to Devin Neal, we have, 2 to 3 missed tackles, depending on how you grade it. 51 yards, touchdown. That's too easy. And those are things you have to learn from. You have to be sound fundamentally. You have to play a disciplined game, especially on the road. And they didn't. And they paid the price for it. And you could see the hurt from Coach Sanders' face. It bothered him. The one thing I don't like about covering college is afterward we don't have locker room access.
Right.
And they brought out Coach Prime and Shedeur. I mean, how do you not bring out a defensive player? You gave up 530 yards and 29 first downs. With all due respect, I mean, we got people asking questions of Shedeur of what happened to the defense. I don't know. He didn't play. I mean, if you want to bring out Travis, okay. I mean, it wasn't his fault, but you got to have a defensive player talk. You got to have a defensive player talk after that game. That's the part I don't like at college. Because NFL, we would have been asking every guy on the defense what happened. Was it, physically overmatched? Was it scheme? Was it Neal better than you thought? Was it? I mean, those are the answers you kind of not only want, you deserve.
Right. You do.
And as you're paying college players, I think it's fair to have them. They should be available. 2 or 3 guys from each side of the ball should be available after games. If the locker room's not open, I understand that. The toothpaste is out of the tube. They're not going back to that. But if we're going to be paying guys millions of dollars, especially the top players, I think there's an accountability that should come with that they're available after games, especially when a defense gets gashed. We should be able to talk to at least one defensive player.
Yeah, 8 penalties for the Buffaloes, as you mentioned, and the time of possession for Kansas, 40 minutes and 11 seconds. You could ask me about any other stat on the planet, and you could just give me that time of possession. I could probably tell you who won with about 99% certainty. You just can't play that kind of game, but hopefully we saw what happened when they had that Nebraska performance. They bounced back, they doubled up. And, maybe this is one of those things in the long, it hurts a lot in the short term because you don't know when you'll have the opportunity to win the Big 12, to make the college football playoff, even in good years. So it does hurt. But then again, for the long term, it's a painful lesson. Most of the guys will be here next year. They're certainly not all going pro. You have Julian Lewis coming in. Coach Prime is staying. So perhaps this is a little bit of, as Danny Bailey, our producer, and I were talking about before the game, this will start a run of a little unfinished business for the Buffaloes that continue to set them up in the program post Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad, if Coach Prime stays, and all the posturing is that he will, certainly by getting the commitment from Juju Lewis. So as he stays, you grow the foundation, you continue to get better up front, O-line, D-line. I mean, the future feels bright for CU. And let's not forget the remarkable improvement year over year. That's significant. I don't care how many kids you get in the portal. It's still hard to get +5 on the win total year over year. This one just stings because you controlled it. You had it right there. If you win that game, you're almost certainly going to beat Oklahoma State, and then you win like every tiebreaker. Now you're just up against it. Now Arizona State becomes the media darling instead of CU, but that's college sports. I mean, you saw this last weekend in college football. I mean, it's hard to finish. The season gets long. Kids get into exams, Thanksgiving. The distractions are real, and you play a team that's hungry, and this is what happened. But I think, again, the future's bright. I'm not going to be totally negative. It was disappointing to see him get run over in the fashion they got run over. Had they lost 34-31 in the shootout, you feel better about it. They didn't punt. Sean, they did not punt. And I found out later the kids from Australia, as I joked about in my column, hopefully his parents did a snapshot of the screen. Sounds like he's from Australia, and that's the one game they came out to see. He didn't punt.
I mean, they got to see a win, I guess. That works. But, you never get to really go out there. It is obviously, we'll find out if they bounce back. They don't have a long time to think about it. The Buffaloes, who have a 10 a.m. kickoff the morning after Thanksgiving, taking on Oklahoma State. They are heavily favored, 15.5-point favorites. So they're expected to get that done. And you're right. And in the end, it's going to be another really good season. Again, it's hard to remember for Buffs fans that 2 seasons ago, this was a 1-11 program. So you have to take the success any way you can, but a very disheartening loss. All systems go for the Broncos. They finally we don't have to talk about, they've never won in Las Vegas. We don't have to talk about nearly a decade of road loss to the Raiders. They sweep the Raiders for the first time in many years, and they are on track. Their percentage of making the playoffs, as I said before Troy came on now, roughly 70%. Now they have to take care of business, but they find themselves in a position that not a lot of people, myself included, thought they'd be in. You want to follow Troy for all of that because what's going on with the Broncos is pretty remarkable. And check out the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck for even more. Troy, thanks so much. Always good to talk to you about all this and both of these in a really interesting football weekend. Thanks.
You got it, Sean. Take care. Have a great rest of the show.
Thanks so much. That's Troy Renck joining us from the Denver Post. Like I said, make sure wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. And I want to remind you, if you're looking for the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize, well, you don't have to go any further than the Denver Athletic Club, right in the heart of downtown Denver. For a century, as a DAC member, you've been able to enjoy the top-notch amenities, like a full fitness center, like massage, Pilates, but there's a spa, a golf simulator. There's a licensed childcare center, too, when you work out. And that's part of what sets the DAC apart. It's that vibrant community because it's a member-owned club, which means it's all about, the members, potentially you, offering year-round social events, co-working, dining, and fun for the entire family. The Denver Athletic Club is truly a club for your whole life. So look at joining the DAC today and visit denverathleticclub.cc for all the details. Nate, we've danced around it a little bit on this program.
You're dancing around, but anybody else? Couple times there, Troy looked like he was in the witness protection program. Did you check that out?
Yeah,
where he just kind of went like the light behind him, and he was just like all of a sudden he was just this shadowy figure. That was hilarious.
You just needed the voice thing. When the Denver Broncos
it was just all it was it was just this like black outline of Troy because of the window behind him. It was just cracking me up. I was like, dude's in the witness protection program all of a sudden.
Yeah, but only one guy kind of does witty pop culture references, so we know
it's fine. I mean, I got no. It's fine. I was just making me laugh.
Yeah, I mean, it was Colorado vibe there. He's got the beanie on, and then looking good.
At one point, he got up.
Yeah,
just left.
Hey, it's 2024. We can multitask.
I just think that's hilarious. All I kept waiting for was some little girl to come in behind him like this.
Oh yeah, or a dog or something.
The dog will totally do it. The dog will totally do it.
But obviously, a big football weekend there. Troy covering the Buffs game on Saturday, headed out to Arrowhead, and then headed out to Las Vegas. He's been getting the frequent flyer miles, obviously. But,
good for him.
But you can get some pretty good food if you go from KC to Vegas. Eat well over the weekend.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, not too
you
bad.
Definitely can.
You can do that. Week 12 in the NFL is almost in the books. It will be tonight. We'll talk a little bit more about the Monday Night Football game in a bit and some ways you might be able to look at your betting options and do well with that. But wow, it would have been an interesting week to be doing that this time because games all over the place. The last hour of the early games, about maybe 12:30 to almost the Broncos kickoff, you needed like 9 TVs. I mean, craziness was happening everywhere. You started already and talked about the Chiefs and the Panthers. The Panthers kind of hang around. They're pesky, and they make the mistake that everybody makes. As soon as you look up, how much time's left on the clock? About 1:45. I literally turned over to the person I was with, and after that happened, looked at the clock and said, they're dead.
Of course they are.
There's more than enough time. Like Mahomes,
and it doesn't matter. Like
basically just
yesterday,
take off down the left sideline, and
yesterday it's him scrambling. Sometimes it's because Travis Kelce finds that little soft spot in the zone. It's like it's always something.
Yeah,
I'm so sick of it.
Some dump off pass to a running back
that turns into like a 25-yard gain.
Yep, but there they go. So the Chiefs get away with it again. So they find themselves at 10-1. Although you're right, boy, does that team need home field. It's not.
They need home field.
It's not as if the Chiefs are lousy by any stretch. They're 10-1. They're in first place. They're the 2-time defending champs. But there's a reason that there has never been a 3-time Super Bowl champ in a row because it's really hard. The salary cap issues in this era of football make it difficult. Injuries, fatigue. Everybody is gunning for you. Everybody circles the Chiefs on their calendar, including the Panthers. The Panthers are having an awful year. If the Panthers would have somehow held on, their fans would have been able to hold on that all year and say, wow, the team's a mess. We might have to give up on the quarterback. We picked up number 1 overall a year ago, but we did get the Chiefs. And so, I give them credit for winning the close one, but you're right. At a certain point, Chiefs fans have got to get a little bit worried. The Commanders and Jalen Daniels have been one of the biggest stories of the league all year. They should have been. The Cowboys have been absolute roadkill. They're tearing themselves apart. They've played poorly. They're angry with the owner. The owner is angry with the players. Now they're complaining about the stadium and the sun. And you know what? They find a way to pull it together and knock off a Commanders team, which is definitely a better team. You talked about the special teams being a problem, but the Commanders, of course, made that a problem by finding a way to let the Cowboys behind Cooper Rush stay in the game.
Well,
speaking of a special teams breakdown, you might want to
shore
up the kick return team.
Yeah, you get some special teams breakdowns in that game. The other thing,
kick returns for touchdowns.
The other thing that was happening is, and this has happened over a couple of weeks, like the Commanders' offense looks a little lost these last couple of weeks.
It's kind of Daniels and McLaurin, and then
I think they're kind of missing out on some things. They couldn't get Brian Robinson going at all, and of course he kind of tweaked the leg a little bit, and they couldn't use him the way that they wanted to. But they did. They let the Cowboys hang around. The Cowboys got some defenders back. I mean, they got some of the guys back, and that is part of the reason why Daniels and company struggled in terms of Washington. If you're in Chicago, I know you lost the game, but Caleb Williams finally looked like the guy you were waiting to see, didn't he?
Yeah, I watched a lot of that game, and I thought
threw for 3 bills and 2 tutties.
Yeah, Bears fans against, by the way, the Vikings, who are still,
we were good.
We act as if sort of the Vikings, when they had lost that game to the Lions, we kind of act like, see, the Vikings are just going to go back to being blah. Folks, they're still 9-2. That's a really good football team. And the Bears were at home, but you look at the Bears in the last couple of games before they replaced their offensive coordinator a couple games ago. And Now all of a sudden you call in the right plays, and Caleb Williams looked like the real deal.
Yeah,
So
he did. He
that's
did look
exciting.
really good. We go around the rest of the league. You got the Dolphins that won their third in a row.
Mhm.
Not surprising. You're at home. You're against the Patriots. But Tua puts up huge numbers.
317 of 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a fantasy owner with Tua, you've been waiting for that, and you got it. You got it, and then some. Jalen Waddle with a phenomenal game yesterday. So the Dolphins got exactly what they would have hoped to have had. In terms of bouncing back after Tua's injury, you still wonder whether there are enough weeks left for them.
That's what it feels like.
To be able to catch up to where they need to be. But I told you earlier on in the program, they do have a relatively easy schedule upcoming for them. So because, as I said, they get to play the Jets twice still, so those should be a couple of victories for them. And then how about the Titans pulling it off in Houston?
Something is wrong in Houston, and there's been rumblings out of there for the last few weeks that there's been some discomfort with yes, they've had injuries, especially on the receiver side, but it just the feeling is that just something isn't right, and they seem discombobulated. CJ Stroud talked about it almost a month ago, how they just didn't feel like they were playing very good football and they weren't playing consistent football. I mean, and Stroud himself stepped out of the back of the end zone.
Oh yeah, exactly. That was the insane part. And now the nice thing is they're in a bad division.
Correct.
I mean, so you look at where Houston is, you're like,
enough anyway.
Okay, well, you're still going to probably be okay because you're sitting there in the AFC South. Jacksonville's not giving you any kind of a push.
No.
We already talked about some of the stuff with the Colts. We know the Titans picked up the victory, but that was still only their third win of the year, despite all of that. So, Will Levis looked good. I have been really disappointed in Will Levis this season. I thought he was actually going to take a couple of steps forward, and he's looked like hot garbage. But yesterday he actually looked a little bit better. I think some of that has to do with the Texans and some of the injuries and things that they're dealing with. But look who's in trouble right now over on the NFC side of things. San Francisco 49ers.
San Francisco. And we know this. We
the
know
Packers,
it's mostly injury.
bare bottom spanked them.
I mean, you don't have Brock Purdy. I mean, I get it. The 49ers really haven't been healthy for even really a single game all year. They haven't had everybody, their full complement. But it just feels like one of those. I mean, we talk about how hard it. Again, I look at like the situation with the Niners, and I look at the Chiefs, and I get it. I get your point that if you flipped one-score games, the Chiefs would be a disaster.
Mm-hmm.
They're sneaking by. But I watch what's happening with the Niners, who have been making a run consistently for championship caliber play at the overlapping with the Chiefs for the last few years. This just kind of happens.
Especially in the NFC West. Look at the standings in the NFC West. It's insane.
Just not the Niners year. You've been in it for years and years. The wear and tear starts to catch up with you. Every team understands. I mean, coming into the season, everyone said you have the Niners and maybe the Lions and then everybody else. Right? I mean, that was the argument. And now it's definitely the Lions and then everybody else.
Well, it's funny. They pointed it out yesterday, I think, in the pregame show before Sunday Night Football, that if you look at the standings, every division has a team that has lost at least 7 games, except the NFC West. It's all beaten up on each other.
Yeah, it's a mess. But in the Niners, when I see that kind of loss, and you're right, the Packers, obviously, it's good, 8-3. They weathered the loss of Jordan Love. They're 8-3. I mean, things are good.
Hanging out right there with the Vikings.
The Niners are terrible. But again, I look at the Niners and I think that's another one where I look at it. I'm just so impressed with what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes do with the Chiefs. I am. I understand that it's going to be really hard for them to win the Super Bowl because the margins get narrower and narrower and narrower. But here's San Francisco with a losing record because those things happen to them too. And the fact that the Chiefs continue to find a way to keep their head above water and keep winning games really, really impresses me. It is impressive. I can't really say much more about it, but it is bad for the Niners. I think it's just one of those years. It's not going to happen. Being 5-6 slate is hard. It's going to be tough for them. But yeah, it's a really fascinating week over in the NFL, and it just shows again that goodness, this is a one-score league for the most part. It really is.
Makes it fun, man.
And even the games that are all over the place, I thought the Niners would win this game. I thought this is the one they'd come back and find a way to get it because they needed it badly. Now, granted, when I picked that, I thought Purdy might still play, and obviously he doesn't. But it's fascinating to see. And
now you got a game. I mean, tonight should probably be a one-score game.
One would think.
I mean, the spread's 2.5.
Tonight's a big one.
This should wind up being another one-score game, I think. The Chargers have looked good. What, 1-4 in a row?
Mm-hmm. Chargers have won 4 in a row.
You got the Harbor Bowl.
Yep.
That's taking place again. I'd like the Harbor Bowl with the
snow peas.
With snow peas, the teriyaki sauce, and let's go with the salmon. We got the Ravens, we got the Chargers tonight. Each of them sitting here with 7 wins on the season. Got a couple of bets for you. For the most part, I think you may see a little bit of a shootout here. I know a lot of people like the over as it sits. I probably would alt it down and then take the over, but I do think you're going to see some scoring. Remember, this Baltimore secondary has not been good at being able to slow people down. And because of that, my favorite touchdown for tonight right there, Quentin Johnson, to have a touchdown. His matchup is favorable going up against this defense. And he's got touchdowns in 3 straight games. And I think he's going to make it 4. And the fact that I can snag this at a plus 215 over at DraftKings, I am all about this. I really like this as an anytime touchdown play for this evening. Again, matchup wise, he and Justin Herbert on the same page. It just like all of it together just feels like an opportunity that Quentin Johnson can take advantage of. So if you want an anytime touchdown for tonight, I like that one. If you want to kind of start to correlate some things together, I like Justin Herbert to have over 1.5 passing touchdowns in the game as well. Again, I think that's how you score against this Ravens team. I know they don't have much of a home field advantage there at SoFi, but I think you still take advantage of it. I do think these guys are going to be moving with their legs, though. So here's an SGP for you that you got to go over to ESPN Bet to build this one. Give me Justin Herbert to have 15 or more rushing yards, and give me Lamar Jackson to have 40 or more rushing yards. You put those two together, plus 150 over at ESPN Bet. When you look at trying to contain, we know Lamar Jackson can find his way out even with this Chargers defense and what they can do against the run. I think he will find his way out. And remember, when you're talking about Lamar, he can pick up 12, 13, 15 of those yards on one carry. And so I think you can get to that 40. You can take Herbert at the 15 or more. The bummer on this one is if you had snagged it earlier this morning, you could have gotten Herbert at 35 or more instead of 40 or more. But you got to bump it up now because that one is not available. It has jumped up. But plus 150 at ESPN, not a bad play. I like Quentin Johnson, by the way, over on his receiving prop. I think you can snag him for 50 or more receiving yards, and you can do that at about a minus 115, minus 120, kind of your standard player prop juice there. I do think we will see that out of Johnson. Again, he's got a really favorable matchup in the secondary for the contest tonight. And I'll tell you what, Sean, let's go over to the hardwood. Let's talk about new daddy, Nikola Jokic.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Nicely done again by the Jokic family and the Nuggets to keep everybody in the dark until they felt like telling us.
Until they felt like it, which was kind of odd, but whatever.
Yep.
So folks, Nikola Jokic, points prop for tonight is basically at 27.5 or 28.5, depending upon the book that you look at. But if you bounce over to BetMGM, you can take Nikola to have 30 or more.
Well, he's averaging 30.3.
Ding, ding, ding. You can take him for 30 or more against the Knicks tonight at Ball Arena, and it jumps to plus 125 at BetMGM. So instead of taking the standard line, yes, you could get hooked. He could have 28. He could have 29. You wind up missing out on this one. But I'll take my chances on one extra bucket, looking at what his averages have been, looking at the fact that he's at home, and he now has, obviously, the birth of his son and some of the family things behind him that took place last week and the games that he missed. And I think he can go for 30 against the Knicks, and I will take that at the plus 125 at BetMGM.
One little wrinkle in there, though. I heard Danny Bailey under his breath say it's Karl Anthony Towns. Of course, Karl Anthony and Nikola Jokic against Karl Anthony Towns. 23 games head-to-head in their career. Jokic has averaged 18.9 points against Towns. Now he's had 10.4 boards and 5.8 assists versus Towns. And, of course, the Nuggets have had the better of Towns teams in the vast majority of those 23 games.
Oh, yeah.
But that's one of the guys that seems to give Jokic a little bit of trouble. We know the Knicks are pretty good, but you think Jokic has got enough?
I think he
too, in part because I think they have to.
Yes.
They have to have it.
Well, not only that, he has to. I mean, he has loaded this team up like a pack mule and is carrying them. And that is why they looked so god awful when he was out. As somebody said on our group chat, amongst all of us at MHS. The Nuggets are a G League team without him.
Well, they basically are. We talked about this last week with Ryan
Mhm.
Blackburn when Nikola Jokic has been on the floor, and it's changed a little bit since that time last Tuesday. But statistically, when Jokic is on the floor, their offensive rating is the highest in the history of the NBA.
Right.
And it's early numbers, it's early in the season, obviously, but the highest in the history of the NBA. When he was off the floor,
it's the worst.
the lowest in the history of the
They're a G
NBA.
League team
How
without
is
him.
that possible with one guy? That's just stunning.
Because he's the best player on the planet. That's why.
You don't think it does? I mean, look, the Nuggets
the best
are
player on
9-6. They've played, I think, relatively well without Aaron Gordon. Without Jokic, it's a different scenario. But yeah, I think this game is going to be a fascinating one to me. I really do want to see this.
He takes care of business even with Cat out there on the floor.
You know, the Knicks are a legitimate title contender in the NBA, and you have an idea to see what the Nuggets will do. That'd be fun. I want to go back to Monday Night Football. Just one question for you.
Yes.
For it, J.K. Dobbins gets an opportunity to go against his old Ravens team. He's top 15 in the league in rushing, top 10 in the league in touchdown.
And Gus Edwards goes against his old team
Gus
too.
Edwards as well. Yeah, both former Ravens. We know the Ravens defense is bad against the run anyway. 26th in the league. Roquan Smith now expected to be out. Feel anything about any of those running backs?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can always look at J.K. Dobbins from a touchdown standpoint. Because
Gus Edwards is not vulturing those.
Yeah, he's not really taking those away. So I think you can always look at Dobbins from that standpoint. But not a bad play if you want to look at it from a touchdown standpoint. I just think that Justin Herbert's going to do it with his arm this evening. It's not to say that J.K. might not score. I just think it's going to wind up happening with the pass catching opportunities. That's why I like Quentin Johnson. Also kind of like I kind of like Will Dissly's player props, folks. His receptions, his yards. I think that he can get it done. I think his yardage prop is at about 39.
You like the Chargers in this game, feels like?
No, actually I don't. I like Baltimore to pick up the victory. But I think this is going to be a highly competitive game. I think this is going to be one of the more entertaining Monday night games that we've had in a little while. And I think this is going to be fun. But I do think the Ravens get the best of the Chargers when it's done. They've won 4 in a row. It's hard to win 5 in a row in the NFL. So I'm going to go ahead and say that the Ravens pick up the victory, but I'm not touching the spread. In this one, like I said, it's 2.5. I'm not even sure I like the money line because it could be something that comes up, last minute. All of a sudden, the Chargers get the job done because they've looked a lot better.
Yeah,
they really have. I also want to do a shout out if any of you care about this kind of thing, but I frankly do. Up over Danny's shoulder right now, we've got the Maui Invitational on.
Yeah.
UConn is playing Memphis right now. They're up by a couple of points. But the reason this is so impactful, in my opinion, they are back playing in Lahaina.
Yeah.
Remember that they had to utilize other venues the last couple of years because of the fire that took place. They are back at the Lahaina Civic Center playing this tournament. And as somebody that just visited Maui earlier this year and saw firsthand entire acreage gone. I just think it's so cool that they're back and playing in Lahaina and that we've got Schulman and Jay Billis in their obnoxious Hawaiian shirts,
right?
Sitting at the table, calling the game. But this is really exciting. Obviously, CU is there.
Yeah, they'll play Michigan State this afternoon. As a matter of fact, ESPN
big dogs against Michigan State. I think Michigan State's favored by 8.
They are,
or 8.5, right in that range. But CU is there. So if you're paying attention to what's going on with the Buffs, that's great. But just on a bigger picture scale, how awesome it is that they are back and playing in Lahaina.
Nice to have it back for sure. I think for Broncos fans, this will be an informative Monday Night Football game tonight.
Yes.
Because I talked about the strength of victory earlier in the program. The Chargers is only slightly better. Here's who the Chargers have beaten: the Raiders, the Panthers, the Broncos, the Saints, the Browns, the Titans, and the Bengals. Not exactly murderer's row. They've lost to the Cardinals, the Steelers, and the Chiefs, just like the Broncos. Yeah. We will find out. I'm not saying that they are frauds. They are not.
They're not frauds. It's a good team.
But the idea that the Chargers are somehow right up there with the Bills and the Chiefs, that remains to be seen.
Well, it's the line of you're not as bad as your record says, or you're not as good as your record says. That is where I would put the Chargers right now.
But
I don't think they're as good as their record says.
This is a heavyweight fight tonight.
Yes, it is.
And we'll see what they look like, because that has obviously major implications for the Broncos.
And a little Harba Bowl.
Harba Bowl.
You got any sriracha for that?
Harba Bowl. Yeah, we had a Super Harbor Bowl once.
All right, I want
So
to
I
watch
have
the
to go back
Maui.
to
I
this
want to watch the Maui Invitational.
We're gonna catch some
Are we good?
basketball. Yeah, we're gonna
Let's
catch some
do it,
college
baby.
hoops. So maybe CU will wipe that bad taste out of their mouth. Probably not against Michigan State, but you never know. That's why they play the games, and that's why we like to talk about them. So he is Nate Lundy. Thanks so much, Troy Renck, for the Denver Post for joining us. Check the podcast, Broncos podcast with Troy Renck, wherever you get your podcast. We're really proud to have that as part of the Mile High Sports Network. Danny Bailey's the man that makes everything work. We'll be back tomorrow. Cody Rourke will help us break down the Broncos top to bottom on a Tuesday. We will catch you then. That's Nate. I'm Sean. This is Mile High Sports.